My wife cheated on me. During my depression, blamed my mental health, and I made sure she left. I'm 37 years old, male, and was married to my wife, who is 36, for 9 years. We've known each other since high school, so she is one of the people who knows me best in the world, and I can confidently say I know her very well too. For simplicity, let's call her Daphne. It's painful to need advice on this, but I don't know what to do, and my mental state isn't helping. I'll give you some context so you can better understand the situation. I had a difficult childhood, to say the least. My mother was a drug addict, and my father, a great person, lost his life because of her friends who were also users. I was the one who found him dead, and it traumatized me deeply. I grew up holding a lot of resentment toward my mother and developed a certain bitterness toward women in general. I ended up in foster care with a very loving family. At first, I was ungrateful and rude to them, but over time, their care helped me change, even though I still carried a lot of pain. I started therapy early to deal with my mental health struggles, but I always tried to stay positive and overcome my difficulties. Meeting Daphne in high school was a turning point. We were friends for several years before any romantic relationship developed. My healthy relationship with her helped soften my bitterness. We attended the same college, graduated together, and started dating 2 years after graduation. 1 year later, I proposed, and we've been married for 9 years. Daphne wasn't around during the worst times of my life, but was always aware of my struggles with mental health. She seemed to understand and willingly took care of me when I needed it. I asked her multiple times if she was truly ready to handle this burden, and she always reassured me that she was. Things began to change about 4 months ago during a severe depressive episode. These episodes have become less frequent over time, but still occur. For the first 2 days, Daphne stayed by my side as she always had, but on the third day, she started acting strangely. She said she needed to go out and came back very late. This pattern repeated for the next 2 days, with her returning in the early hours of the morning. When I emerged from that episode, I started thinking more clearly. Her behavior was unusual, but I didn't consider infidelity because I trusted her. I decided not to bring it up, which was probably a mistake. 2 months later, on another particularly difficult day, Daphne disappeared for several hours again. When she returned, I calmly asked where she had been, and she became defensive, which caught me off guard. She said she had been out with friends, but something about it felt off. Over time, I noticed a pattern. When she disappeared again, even though I wasn't struggling that day, I knew something was going on. I decided to investigate on my own. I've always been good with technology and know my way around an Android phone. When Daphne went to take a shower and left her phone in the living room, I seized the opportunity. I quickly went through it, looking for anything that might confirm my suspicions. That's when I found messages between her and someone else, clearly romantic and intimate in nature. My heart shattered on the spot. I read enough to confirm what I feared. She was cheating on me. Worse, it became evident that the time she disappeared during my depressive episodes were to meet this person. I didn't confront Daphne immediately. I wanted to be sure about how to handle everything before I exploded. I went straight to the nearest lawyer and began preparing for a divorce. Since we had a prenuptial agreement with a separation of assets, there wouldn't be much debate about dividing property. When I finally confronted Daphne, she denied everything at first. When I showed her the evidence, she began blaming me, saying my depression and mental health issues had pushed her to someone else. That was like a knife to the chest. I had spent years worrying if I was a burden to her, constantly asking if she wanted to continue our marriage. She always reassured me she did, but now she was using my vulnerabilities against me. After much arguing and tears, mostly mine, she finally admitted to the affair but showed no real remorse. She claimed she felt our marriage had grown stale but never communicated this to me. I finalized the divorce as quickly as possible. She left our house with nothing and wasn't entitled to any of the assets I had built over the years. I don't feel proud of everything that happened, but honestly, I feel it was necessary. Now I'm trying to rebuild my life. My mental state is still not at its best, but I'm focused on continuing therapy and surrounding myself with people who genuinely support me. I don't wish anything bad for Daphne, but I also don't want her to be part of my life anymore. I waited a few minutes, put on a simple disguise, sunglasses, a jacket, and a cap, and headed straight to the bar where I knew she would be. It didn't take long before I spotted her sitting at the counter, already holding a drink. I waited to see if her friends would show up, but instead a man sat down next to her. At first it seemed like they didn't know each other, but soon they were talking and laughing. She touched him frequently, in a way that made it clear what was happening. I waited until they got up and left together, together. I followed them for a few blocks until they entered a residential building. I stayed across the street, waiting for her to come out. I planned to take a photo for proof and then go home. However, when she came out with the man, taking pictures not just of them together, but also of the goodbye kiss at the building's entrance, it all became undeniable to me. I lost control. I crossed the street and started shouting, asking how she could do this to me. The man stood there, surprised, while Daphne told him to go back inside the building. He obeyed, and I was left face to face with her. I couldn't contain my anger. I asked why, and she said, "I'm tired of your depression and your ups and downs. It's exhausting. I needed to be happy." Those words destroyed me. Everything I had always tried to avoid happened. I had repeatedly asked her to be sure she wanted to stay with me, considering my struggle with depression, and she always said yes, that she accepted me as I was. I started walking aimlessly around the city. It took me over an hour to get back home. Part of me wanted something to happen to me, some physical pain that could make me forget what I was feeling. It was a foolish thought, but at that moment it seemed logical. When I got home, Daphne was already there. She began apologizing as soon as she saw me, but I couldn't say a word. I went straight to the bedroom and locked the door. The next day, I didn't see her, and I felt relieved. I didn't want to talk to her or know where she was, but now all I want is justice. I've spent my entire life dealing with pain and trauma, and the person who was supposed to be my safe haven betrayed me in the worst possible way. It was one of the most painful experiences I've ever had. I'll read every comment left here because I have nothing better to do, but I want to know how I can make her suffer the way she made me suffer. I think that's the only thing that could give me some kind of closure right now, because I'm not interested in betrayal as revenge. Update: I want to deeply thank everyone who helped me with the previous post. Honestly, it was very hard to open up like that and expose all my weaknesses, but most of the comments were incredibly kind and supportive, and I'm very grateful for that. It's been a while since I made that post, but I'm happy to say things are much better for me now. I've followed much of the advice you gave me to plan my next steps as carefully as possible. The first thing I did was call her to talk. She had no idea, but I had already had a long discussion with a divorce attorney and knew there was no way to fix what we had. I admit I might have been naive enough to forgive her if she had cheated only once, but after finding out she had cheated with what I assumed were several people, and because of the horrible things she said to me, I knew there was no going back. I could never love that woman again. When she arrived at my house, I asked her to sit down, and she obeyed. I asked how many people she had cheated on me with, and initially she said it was just one. I kept pressing, telling her I knew more than she thought. She insisted multiple times it was only one person until I bluffed, saying I had hired a private investigator. I mentioned one address and then another, and that's when she finally admitted she had slept with 3 people. I don't know if that was the whole truth, but it was enough for me. I handed her the divorce papers right then and told her I couldn't continue life with her. She started begging and crying as I expected, but I think she realized it was useless, so she eventually gave up. She left with the papers, and I spent the rest of the day drinking. Eventually, we entered the divorce hearing stage, and I was relieved to have some evidence proving her infidelity, which helped tip things in my favor. Surprisingly, my mental health was brought up during the process, with many arguments about how hard it was to live with me. It was horrible to hear my struggles used against me, but I guess most divorces are dirty like that. I won't bore you with all the details of that part, but it was a long and exhausting process. In the end, her lawyer argued that dealing with my mental health had been a significant challenge for her, but that wasn't accepted as justification for her infidelity. Overall, things went in my favor. I managed to avoid alimony payments and gave up the apartment to her, as it would have too many bad memories for me. However, I kept the car, which would be more useful to me than the house. After the divorce, a few weeks later, when I was already settled in a new place, I made sure to tell everyone who knew both of us that Daphne and I were separating. I didn't lie at any point. I explained in detail that she had cheated on me because of my depressive episodes. I sent the same message to friends, family, co-workers we were close to, and even our former landlady. I wanted to make sure everyone knew what kind of person she was, so that if anyone wanted to get involved with her in the future, they'd know what they were dealing with. She called me an hour later and spent 10 whole minutes cursing me out, but I let her say everything and in the end just hung up the phone. Since then, I haven't spoken to Daphne except for that profanity-filled call. A co-worker of hers replied to one of my messages saying she was facing many problems at work because of the gossip. He asked me to reconsider and deny the things to help her, but I left his message on seen. I don't think I'll ever get seriously involved with another person again. There's too much fear in me now. Fear of the ways a woman can hurt me, and I'm not willing to discover any more of them. Maybe I'll have fun on dating apps because the body has its needs, but I'm not looking for anything serious. I'm relatively old. I don't want to have children, and perhaps living without a woman will bring a simplicity I gladly accept. Either way, I hope those of you who choose the path of relationships find women you can trust and love forever, because I know they exist. I'm just not willing to take the risk of looking for one again.